And now let's bring in our political panel. Let's start with reporter Rebecca Berg, conservative columnist and radio talk show host John Phillips, and Republican strategist Evan Siegfried. Thank you for coming in, one and all. John, let's start with you. This is a campaign promise from the president. When I say this, I'm talking about infrastructure. You talk to Trump supporters every day on the radio. Is this a priority for them?
Absolutely, and I think it's wonderfully altruistic for him to start out wanting to get a bipartisan bill through, but he should have a plan B ready to go, because I think that is likely to fall apart almost immediately. I suspect that Democrats will go into this being both greedy and difficult. They're going to be greedy because Trump's going to be left holding the price tag, so they're going to ask for the moon. And they're going to be difficult because once you've been part of the resistance, it's hard to go from saying the guy should be impeached to saying your bridges are irresistible. So I suspect he's going to need more Republican votes than he thinks that he is. And I would do that by spending the money in red states, and when I spend money in blue states, I would make sure to target that money in districts where vulnerable Republicans are running for re-election. Wow,
that would be incredibly sort of blatantly political. I'm not saying that it's not maybe a smart political strategy, but there are obviously also a lot of blue states that need that work on their bridges and roads. Evan, the White House is telling CNN that Trump will propose $200 billion in federal spending on this. That's the floor, they call it, of what they're willing to spend. And the hope is that the states will add up to $800 billion. Unclear whether the states even have that kind of cash. But just let's focus on the federal side of this. Is that going to be a problem for fiscal hawks when you're talking about $200 billion in federal spending?
Well, we had this conversation a year ago where the president was talking about how he wanted to come out of the gate in his presidency and do a $1 trillion infrastructure plan that would mend public and private financing. But fiscal hawks balked. They said there's no way we're going to do $1 trillion in government money. If the president had come out and then said, okay, a $200 billion floor to start, that would have been more receptive. But I think deficit hawks are very worried because they did hold their tongues a lot with the tax bill, and they're going to be sitting back and trying to say, we need to actually do something that's serious, which is why we've also been hearing about entitlement reform and other issues that have caused fiscal problems. So I think that the president going out and talking about $200 billion, that's great, but I don't know where the appetite is, and I don't know how he gets the votes. I suspect this will be a dead issue by March.
Wow, that's quite a prediction. Rebecca, you just heard what Evan said about the fact that a lot of Republican deficit hawks are going to say thanks, but no thanks. That would mean, to avoid the prediction we just heard, that it would be dead by March, Democrats are going to have to get on board. Do you think that there are enough Democrats who are willing to work with the president on infrastructure to get this passed?
Dana, I think the key word in your question is enough, because it's certainly possible that the president could find some Democrats to come along with a plan like this, especially when you consider that infrastructure spending is something that Democrats want to get done, and they've made their own proposal earlier this year to that effect. Whether they can agree on those details is going to be an open question, but you do have, especially on the Senate side, 10 Democrats running in states where Donald Trump won, Democrats who might be inclined to support something like an infrastructure bill being pushed by the president. It would be an opportunity for Democrats like Joe Donnelly in Indiana, Joe Manchin in West Virginia, John Tester in Montana, Heidi Heitkamp in North Dakota, some of those vulnerable Democrats running for re-election in 2018, to show their voters back home that they are willing to work with Donald Trump to pass some of his agenda. But of course, what we saw happen with tax reform was that Democrats, even those vulnerable Democrats running in those red states, stuck with the national party, and Democrats unanimously rejected the Republican tax plan, rejected Donald Trump's tax plan. And so the question is going to be, is the political incentive greater for those vulnerable Democrats to work against the president when he has this low approval rating, when we've seen their base so energized by Democrats working against him? And that's going to be the key, I think, for the president in this case.
I think you're exactly right. And Evan, John, I want to flip over to the base on the conservative side. I've spoken to grassroots conservative leaders in recent weeks, and they're really sounding the alarm for the Republican establishment. Let's take a listen.
It may not be likely that the